Yesterday we spoke about the opening Name, the opening lines to the Mathnawi, and we spoke about the first discourse. And we mentioned that Maulana Rumi wrote what he wrote, not from himself, but out of pure inspiration. Rumi was someone who went almost 40 years of his life without writing a poem. He was not a poet by trade. He was not a court poet. He did not get paid for his poetry. He was a scholar. He studied all of the knowledges of his day and became eminent and learned, and had many students and disciples from around the world who were studying with him. But of course, at the age of around 37, he would have this chance encounter with Shamsi Tabrizi, his master, which would lead to this great opening and transformation. Today, when we visit the museum that celebrates his life, we'll speak more about his life. But suffice it to say, in regards to this work, the Mathnawi, is that he wrote it as a manual of wayfaring. He wrote it as a manual to bring us to self-realization and self-transformation and self-illumination. And for 750 plus years now, it has taken countless souls into the divine presence. And the whole spiritual order was founded around a single poem. But not just any poem. This epic poem. And so today, we want to continue in exploring some of the discourses of Book 1 in order to try to drop us deeper into this beautiful text. One of the things that Rumi did not do is he did not write a step-by-step manual of the path. Others of the Sufis did that. Imam al-Ghazali is very known for his very structured step-by-step manuals of the path. Imam al-Haddad, Allah be pleased with them, many of the great Sufis did this. But Rumi did not do this, even though he read them. He read Ghazali clearly. But he seemed to have an understanding that there's something about poetry that actually can even bypass our egos or bypass our rational mind and pierce our hearts. And so he decided to write a poem. Now, as we mentioned, Book 1 of the Mathnawi is about the nafs. It's about this human selfhood. Nafs is often translated as ego, but that's only an approximation when we talk about the lower nafs. As we spoke about yesterday, there are higher dimensions of the nafs, and so I think the best translation of nafs in English is self. It's the most literal translation. It means the self. But of course we have various dimensions of the self, and this is what the nafs gets to. Of course, each book of the Mathnawi has a theme, and it's 6 books. The 6th book, the theme of which is Tawheed, divine unity. And Rumi wrote it as a mirror. And so, like a mirror that you use, right? If you have a pocket mirror, it has a kind of clasp, and it opens like this, and you look at yourself. The Mathnawi is also like a mirror, and it opens. In fact, between the 6th and 7th discourses, or the 3rd and 4th book, there's a story that starts at the end of the 3rd book and goes to the 4th book. It's the only story that is not contained in a book. And so Rumi actually wrote that to be the clasp, right, to the mirror. The architecture of it is very specific. And so our self mirrors divine unity. The first book mirrors the last book, which is the divine unity. And of course, is a saying of our Prophet ﷺ, or Sayyidina Ali, it's often attributed to, Man arafa nafsu faqad arafa rabbu. Whoever knows themselves knows their Creator, knows their Lord. So Rumi is giving us, especially in the beginning, this map of ourself, this spiritual anthropology. don't think that the self is something easy to know. The self is the hardest thing to know in creation because it is the most nuanced and the most deep and the most profound thing that Allah created in existence. Not the stars or quarks or quasars or distant galaxies, but your very selfhood. And of course, we have this beautiful saying in our tradition. Allah says, "The heavens and the earth cannot contain me, but the heart of my believing servant can contain me." Or embrace me, maybe is a better word. Can embrace me. So we each have the most precious, precious thing in existence within our very being. Now, so Rumi wrote this to help us uncover our selfhood. And as we mentioned, every character in every one of the stories is an aspect of ourself. So we spoke about the first discourse. We can't speak about all 12 because we only have a week together. But today we're going to speak about 2 discourses, the 4th and the 9th discourse. And these mirror each other. There's a lot of mirroring going on, right? At every level of the arrangement and architecture of the book, there is mirroring. And one of the key themes is mirroring. In fact, in this 4th story, Rumi gives the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Al-mu'min mirat al-mu'min." The believer or the faithful is the mirror of the faithful. Right. And one thing that this means on one level is that we are mirrors for each other. We reflect the light back to each other. And that's why on the path, if someone compliments you, say, "I'm just your mirror. You're seeing your own beauty in me." But on a higher level, we all know in the divine 99 most beautiful names, one of them is Al-Mu'min. Al-Mu'min means the faithful. Our brother Mu'min, yeah, it's a beautiful name. Mu'min is the one who has iman, the one who fulfills the trust, the one who is faithful. And it's one of Allah's names. And so each one of us is a mirror of Al-Mu'min, of the divine. But of course, we have to polish before we can truly reflect that divine light and those divine qualities. So these 2 stories mirror each other, and they almost explicitly mirror each other because their theme is that they're both stories of lions. So we'll tell the first one, and then we'll speak about some of the symbolism, and we'll read just a little bit of the passage because again, each one is about 400, 500 lines. And then we'll summarize the second one and read a few passages for them because their themes mirror. Again, Rumi wrote the Mathnawi to, on its purpose or on its surface, appear somewhat random. Like this story, that story, there's no theme, right? But actually, it's incredibly intentional. And of course, the Quran is also like this, right? Especially Western people come to the Quran and they're like, "I don't get it. It's chaotic, right? I can't, right?" Rumi said of the Quran, he said the Quran is a mirror, right? And you see yourself in it. So for those who bring light to it, they see light. Those who bring darkness to it, they just see that reflected to them. And then Maulana, he said that the Quran is like a shy bride. She doesn't unveil herself for everyone. You have to come with adab and come with the proper means and speak to her wali. Because the Quran is like that. May Allah open the Quran to us. No. And so Rumi says in the introduction, by the way, there's an Arabic introduction to the Mathnawi before the Song of the Reed. He says, this book is the usul ad-din, the roots of the root of the root of the way. And it is the expositor of the Quran. So really this whole book is a mystical commentary on the Quran. It's a way to understand what's happening. And you read it, it's like not a single line goes by, but there's some reference to a Quranic verse or a Quranic story. And so this story of the fourth story is very beautiful. Now, it will be remembered from yesterday, we mentioned that there's 12 stories, 3 blocks of 4. The first 4 about the nafs al-amara, that lower commanding self, that compulsive self, that ego self. And so this is the last story of that self, and it's going to transition us then into the second dimension of selfhood, which starts to awaken, but still is kind of like in that greater jihad and is pulled to light and darkness. So he's starting to bring us to that, okay? So the story is like this. And of course, now that we've all been initiated into this, we'll listen at the surface level of narrative, but with the eye of our heart, reflecting on the second level of symbology. What is he getting at symbolically? So the story is as follows. There was a jungle, and every jungle has to have a king, and the king of the jungle is the lion. And so the lion was a very happy king, and he had abundant food to eat from amongst the other animals in the forest, in the jungle. However, the other animals were not very happy because they were the prey of the lion. And so they were terrorized all the time. And so they got together, they had a council. And they said, how can we break free of this tyranny of the lion? All of our days are in fear of being eaten. When will he come out? Anytime. And so they devised a plan. And the hare stepped forward, the cunning hare, the rabbit. He said, I have an idea. He said, let us go to the lion and we will propose a plan. And we will appeal to him and say, you don't have to hunt anymore, you can just rest. And every few days, one of us will come to you and offer ourselves to you. And how would they do this? They would have a lottery, the animals. They would draw lots. And whoever got the short end of the stick, he brings himself to the lion. Right? And all the animals said, okay, this is better than being in constant fear. If he accepts this, we'll all agree that if we get the short end, we'll go. So they go to the lion, and the lion is like, I don't trust you. Right? And the lion says, I actually enjoy hunting you. So what is in this for me? They say, you can just rest. Right? You don't have to exert yourself. And then Rumi uses this to get into a story about, right? Should we have tawakkul and rely, or should we have action, right? Should we just rely on God and not do anything, or should we act? So he gets into this kind of theological debate like that. And eventually, though, the lion agrees. And so this goes on for a number of months, and every few days they draw lots, and the lion gets his weekly meal. He has his allowance. And everyone is happy, and they can all be in peace until that time. So that goes on for a number of months, until one day they draw lots, and the hare gets the short end of the stick. And then he says, why do we accept this? That this lion is tyrannizing us. Right? Now he becomes a revolutionary. When it's him, he was fine with it before. And so he protests, and all the other animals are like, nope, it's your turn. You go. We don't want to hear it. He said, no, I have another plan. We can get out of this. And they said, no. We're all in peace now. It's your turn to go. Don't mess this up. And he says, no, I have a better plan. And I'm inspired. And so they get into this, and they say, you're just a little, right, hare. Don't try to be bigger than you are. Don't try to be an elephant or something. Just go and get eaten. And he says, no. Even though I'm little, he says, every animal is inspired with something that others aren't inspired with. He said, the bee, the honeybee, it's inspired with what the elephant is not. It produces honey. Elephants can't do that. And then he says, the musk deer produces musk. And he said, even a little spider produces its web, and a silkworm produces silk. So he's kind of, right? So they're listening, they're like, all right. And he says, the important thing is knowledge. So he says, ilm. And every creature is given its ilm, its knowledge. Right? It's sacred knowledge and understanding. And then, so they say, okay, tell us your plot then. He said, I can't tell you. He says, if you're given a true inspiration, you should keep it a secret. Don't tell everyone. So they're really skeptical, but they say, well, I guess we'll let you do this because if you mess it up and the lion gets mad, he's just going to kill you and eat you anyway. So either way, go ahead. So he goes to the lion, but he makes sure to be late. So the lion is very angry because the lion's looking, he's like, yo, where's my animal? Where's my meal? So he shows up late, but he makes sure at the very end to run, so it seems like he was rushing. So he runs out of breath, and the lion sees him, and he starts to roar ferociously. And he said, I knew I shouldn't have trusted you, treacherous animals. I should have just eaten you all. He says, no. You are the king of the jungle. Please let me explain. He said, I was on my way to offer myself to you, and I was with my friend, another hare, and we were both going to be your dinner. He said, but we were accosted by another lion. And this other lion grabbed my friend in his jaws, and I said, please don't eat him. We belong to the king of the jungle. I told him we belong to you. And he said, I don't care about him. Right? If he wants this hare, let him take it from me. Right? And so he even tried to grab me, but I ran away, and I have just ran directly to you. So this is the reason we're late. And so the lion's kind of skeptical, but then his ego gets inflamed. Like, who's testing me? I'm the king of the jungle. Who is this other lion who's trying to claim my food? So then he says, take me to him. And so the hare jumps on the lion's back, and he starts directing him. So they're running through the jungle. He said, he's there. So they go. He takes him to the edge of a well. And then the hare says, we're getting closer. And he said, okay, where is he? And he said, he's in that well. And so the hare then, he pretended like he was deeply frightened of the lion. He said, I'm scared. He said, I'll protect you. And so he goes to the edge of the well, and he looks in with this hare on his shoulder, and he sees another lion in the well with a hare on its shoulder. Oh, he said, there's the lion who's taken my hare, and he jumps and attacks. And he, of course, had attacked his own reflection and becomes trapped in the well, and the hare jumps out. And all of a sudden, the lion looks up, and he realized that he's been tricked by the hare. So this is where this section is, and I'll just read it to you so you get a sense. As soon as they looked in the water, in the well, there shone forth in the water the light from the lion and the hare. The lion saw his own reflection. From the water shone the image of a lion with a plump hare at his side. When he beheld his adversary in the water, he left him, the hare, and sprang into the well. He fell into the well which he had dug, because his iniquity was coming back on his own head. The iniquity of evildoers became a dark well. So have said all the wise. The more iniquitous one is, the more frightful is his well. Divine justice has ordained worse for worse. O you who from iniquity are digging a well for others, you are making a snare for yourself. And he says, the lion saw himself in the well, and in his fury he did not know himself at that moment from the enemy. He regarded his own reflection as his enemy. Necessarily he drew a sword against himself. Oh, many an iniquity that you see in others is your own nature reflected in them. In them shone forth all that you are in your hypocrisy and iniquity and insolence. You are that, and you are striking those blows at yourself. It is yourself that you are cursing at that moment. You do not see clearly the evil in your own self, or else you would oppose and you would fight your own lower self. You are assaulting yourself, O simpleton, like the lion who made a rush at himself. When you reach the bottom of your own nature, then you will know that that vileness was from yourself. At the bottom of the well, it became manifest to the lion that he who seemed to him to be another was really his own image. O you who see the bad reflection on the face of your uncle, it is not your uncle that is bad, it is you. Do not run away from yourself. The faithful are mirrors to one another. This saying is related from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi. You held a blue glass before your eye. For that reason, the whole world seemed to be blue. Unless you are blind, know that this blueness comes from yourself. Speak ill of yourself. Speak no more ill of anyone else. If the true believer was not seen by the light of God, how did things unseen appear clearly to the true believer? Inasmuch as you were seen by the fire of God, you did not discern the difference between good and evil. Little by little, throw water on the fire, that your fire may become light, O man of sorrow. Through you, O Lord, the purifying water, that this world fire may become holy light. Ameen. So Rumi has this play on words between the word nur and nar. Right? Nur and nar. They're related in Arabic. Nur is light and nar is fire. There's only a vowel that separates them. And so basically he's saying everyone is either seeing through the nur of Allah or the nar of Allah. When you see your own selfhood, and when you purify yourself, and you cleanse the lens of your selfhood, right, you see through the light of God. But when you have the veil of your ego that you're seeing through, you see through the fire of God. And fire, it gives up smoke. It becomes obscured. Through a fire you can't see. When it's smoky, everything is obscured. So everyone is either seeing through the light or the fire. And in the next world, of course, there's talk in all these religions about the fire. But know that the fire is only the light experienced by the illusory self. We talk about alchemy, and of course alchemy is an Arabic word, alchemia. What is alchemy? It is turning base metal to gold. Gold is special because it is this pure substance, and it's a symbol of the spirit, that were you to put gold into the fire, any substance that is less than gold would burn off. But the gold would remain pure, because gold burns at a higher intensity, at a higher heat. So they used to test gold to see if it was counterfeit by putting it in fire, because if they had mixed it with base metals, it would burn off. Likewise, the spiritual path is about being purified by the fire of love, such that that which is in us that is other than the pure gold of our spirit burns off, the base metal burns off. And those that do not go through this purification process in this world, they enter the fire of purification in the next world. May Allah save us from that. May Allah not test us with that. May Allah be gentle with us. And inshallah, anyone with any light in them, they will eventually go to the eternal light after that purification. So this is what Rumi is getting at. Now, he says, all the wise have said this, is that whatever evil you do, it comes back to you. Every tradition, this is a foundational teaching. No one gets away with anything. No one gets away with anything. Right? May Allah be gentle with us. There is forgiveness and Allah can wipe things clear, but we have to turn in tawbah, turn in asking forgiveness, and Allah can wipe our slate clean. So, let's get to the level of symbolism. Who thinks they know what the lion is? The nafs? Yes, but it's a particular trait or component, or in a certain sense almost like the root of the nafs. Pride, arrogance. Kibr is the word in Arabic, important technical term. Kibr. Exactly. It's arrogance. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no one will enter the garden who has within their heart a mustard seed of arrogance, of kibr. And this hadith is very scary, because who can claim to be free of a mustard seed of arrogance? If you can claim to be free of that, you have much more than a mustard seed. Mustard seed is the smallest, if you seed a mustard seed, they're the smallest seed. It's an atom's weight, it's anything. And the companions were also, when they heard this, so one of them responded, Ya Rasulullah, a man loves to have nice sandals and nice clothes. Is that kibr? And the Prophet, he said, no. Kibr is to look down on people and to reject the truth. That's the definition of arrogance. To look down on people and to reject the truth. In Arabic, the word kibr, you have to have mutakabir ilay. You have to have, it's a relation. It has to be someone that you think you're better than. And the Sufis emphasize this: if you think you're better than anyone, not anyone, anything, you haven't taken the first step on the path. The kibr is the greatest veil. And the Sufis are called the fuqara, the poor, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they have no money. It means existentially poor, that they realize that everything they have, every trait they have, every quality is from Allah, is a gift from Allah, so they don't claim it for themselves. Not only like the good traits and qualities and talents that you have, but fundamental things like life, will, power, knowledge. All of these are divine attributes that Allah has loaned us, and He'll take back. And if we've seen any of our elders, start to age, you see will, power, knowledge, and eventually life be stripped away from them. Right. So the Sufis are those, the fuqara. It's also what the word dervish is the same word in Persian. It means the poor, someone who is poor. But it doesn't mean that there are some dervishes and fuqara, Sufis, that are very wealthy, but they realize their existential or ontological poverty. We all are poor. We're all completely in need of Allah for everything. But the Sufis are those that realize this experientially. May Allah not allow us to be veiled and think that we have anything. No. So that's the lion. So what do you think the hare is? Okay. Yes. 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 So the hare represents the aql, another technical term. Aql means intellect. This is an important and subtle point, because sometimes it appears in Rumi and in other Sufis that they really venerate and honor the intellect as this great gift from God. But other times it seems that they call it a low thing. Right? So it can be confusing. And Rumi will often do this play where he'll praise something and then he'll blame it, and you're like, wait, I'm confused. Right? He's playing on this so you don't get too attached to things. But an important frame that Rumi emphasizes, and other Sufi, is that there's two types of intellect. Aqli juzvi and aqli kulli are the terms in Persian, which means the partial intellect and the universal intellect. So the partial intellect is the rational mind. It's our cleverness. Right? It's that intellect, but that it's kind of separate. Right? It sees the part. It can analyze. It can do addition and subtraction and these kind of things. The partial intellect separates things. But as long as it's a partial intellect, it's cut off from the light of God. It can only see the parts. The universal intellect, aqli kulli, it could be translated as the universal intellect or the whole intellect, or the holistic intellect, you could say. It could also be translated, aql could also be translated as consciousness. This is the intellect or the consciousness which sees the whole, which sees with the light of reality, which doesn't just see the outward forms, but sees the inner reality. So the partial intellect can only see the part. It can only see the surface. But the universal intellect sees meaning, it's able to reflect on the deeper wisdom of things. And so the partial intellect, it just sees surah, it sees form. The universal intellect sees ma'na, sees meaning. Yes?
Where does emotional intelligence fall?
Emotional intelligence. That's a good question. We'll get to that, inshallah. Very good question. So, Rumi points out that Iblis himself was very clever. He had the partial intellect. And Rumi even says he's the first to use qiyas, analogical reasoning. Right? Because he looked when Allah created Adam and blew the spirit into him and commanded the angels to bow, and Iblis was a jinn, was a spirit, but was a great and righteous spirit who had, because of his ibadah and his devotion, become part of the company of the angels. And so, but when Allah commanded them to bow, Iblis refused. And he said, Ana khayru minhu, I am better than him. I am fire and he is clay. He's just earth. He's just dirt. Why would I bow to something lesser than me? Right? And he had what? Kibr, is arrogance. But it's also envy. Because Iblis wanted to be the one that was bowed to. Right? But what does Rumi say? He was doing analogical reasoning. He was like, wait a second. As opposed to just surrendering, he was saying, I think my intellect can outsmart the divine. Right? This is the partial intellect. He could only see the surface. He could only see the form of Adam. Is fire better than earth? It's irrelevant. Because Adam is not Adam because of his clay. You are not you because of your clay. You are you because of the ruh. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ, the divine spirit that is blown into you. That is why the angels bow. Not because of the form. But he was veiled. He couldn't see the reality. And so the way of Iblis is to remain on form. The way of the angels and of the true Adamites, Bani Adam, is to see meaning. What is, some of you I think may have heard we mention this, but what is the etymological opposite of diabolical? Diabolic. Diabolic.
Like reason?
We would say, yes, I mean, the angelic, right? But what I'm talking about the actual root word. Symbolic. The etymological opposite of diabolic is symbolic. Diabolic means to make two, to separate. It means to stop at the form. Symbolic is to make one. Is to see through the form into meaning. It's even in the etymology of English. And so the path of Iblis, the diabolical way, is to judge things by their outer forms. And to seek outer forms. Silver and gold and dunya and fame and these type of things. Right? Even like prejudice and racism, isn't it? It's like this diabolic, you're just a form. You're not seeing the inner spirit of this being. So may we not follow the diabolic way. May we follow the path of seeing things as they are. Another way to say symbol is ayat. To see that everything that you see is pointing beyond itself, or is a mirror reflecting the light of reality. And so, the partial intellect, as long as we're not in alignment with the spirit and we're veiled by this arrogance, we're seeing through, like Iblis, this separateness. That's another way to think the partial intellect is like the intellect of separateness. So you have these Richard Dawkins types and Sam Harris, right? Very intelligent, using their rational minds to deny anything beyond the form. May Allah forgive us and allow us to see things as they truly are. And of course, just to fill out the symbolism, the animals in this, they represent the spiritual powers or spiritual faculties or spiritual potentials in all of us that's being devoured by this arrogance. It's being devoured. Our spiritual faculties, our powers, our faculties of perception that we all possess, they're actually being cannibalized by our own arrogance, by our own kibr, by our own ego self. May Allah forgive us. So, this is what Rumi says. Now, we're going to get to the other story that compares, but there's one section I was hoping we could look at. So Rumi has this speech about the nafs. Again, he's talking about the lower nafs. And he's commenting on this idea of the greater jihad, the greater struggle, the greater battle that wages inside of each one of us. He says, this nafs is hell. It is hell. And hell is a dragon, the fire of which is not diminished by oceans of water. Oceans won't put out this fire of the nafs. It would drink up the 7 seas, and still the blazing of that consumer of all creatures would not be diminished. La ilaha illallah. Stones and stony-hearted deniers enter it, miserable and shamefaced. Still it is not appeased by all this food. No matter how many, right? No matter how much you feed the nafs, it's not appeased. It says, I want more, right? I want more. It is not appeased by all this food until there comes to it from God this call. Until God calls out to the fire of the nafs, are you filled? Are you filled? It says, right, the nafs says, the fire of this dragon fire of the nafs says, not yet. Lo, here is the fire, here is the glow, here is the burning. Right, this powerful image that our ego is hell. And it's this fire-breathing dragon. No matter what you feed it, no matter what you get, no matter how much wealth, no matter how much praise, no matter how many people you're dominating at the top of the hierarchy, it says more. Give me more. Right? He says, it made a mouthful of and swallowed the whole world. This nafs would just, with one bite, take up the whole world. Its belly crying aloud, is there any more? La ilaha illallah. Then he says, Allah, from the placeless, sets his foot on it, then subdues it at the command, kun fayakun. Be, and it is. Inasmuch as this self of ours is part of hell, and all parts have the nature of the whole, to God belongs the foot, yani the power, to kill it. Indeed, who but God should draw his bow to vanquish it? Right? So this fire-breathing dragon that you're struggling with, you're trying to conquer your own nafs, never you will. You will never be able to overcome it. You need to invite the divine into your being, and Allah will draw the bow and vanquish the dragon. He says only the straight arrow is put on the bow. But this bow of the lower self, has its arrows bent back and crooked. You can't put your crooked self on the bow to slay the dragon. Be straight like an arrow and escape from the bow, for without a doubt, every straight arrow will fly to its mark. Right, so if we straighten ourselves, we become upright, we become like an arrow that Allah can shoot. Then he says, when I turn back from the outer jihad, I set my face towards the inner jihad. We have returned from the lesser jihad. We are engaged along with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi in the greater jihad. Then he says, deem of small account the lion who breaks the ranks of his enemy. The true lion is he that conquers himself. Allahu Akbar. So this is how he ends this beautiful, beautiful fourth discourse. Now, just to close out this session in what time remains, I want to summarize in brief the other lion story. So we're skipping ahead now because this is the 9th discourse. And the 9th is the first and the last 4 discourses, which get at the higher self. The nafs al-mutma'inna, the self at peace. And these speak about the higher level of the self. And it mirrors this other lion. So when we go through the spiritual transformation, we attain to this self at peace. It should be noted that these 4 stories, each one of them speaks about, only the 4th one speaks about completely the self at peace, the enlightenment, the awakening. The other ones speak about when you're close to it, but there's subtle things that are still keeping you back from the great fatah. So this story is like that. And we'll summarize it again, and then we'll read one section, which is one of my favorite sections in the whole Mathnawi. So this story is about a lion, a wolf, and a fox. Another lion story. In this story, these 3 decide that they're going to go hunting together. The lion, the wolf, and the fox. Now, the wolf and the fox are very honored to be with the lion because, of course, he's the king of the jungle and the greatest of hunters. Right, so the lion, but he's humble. He's like, okay, you can ride with me, right? Even though he doesn't need them. So they're really honored. They're like, we're with the lion. So they go hunting and they're very successful. And very quickly they kill 3 animals. Right? They catch an ox, a goat, and a hare. Oh, the hare again is showing up. There's symbolism here. They catch an ox, a goat, and a hare. So they're sitting there with their kill and they're feeling good. And the lion asks the wolf, how should we divide our kill? And the wolf, he looks and he thinks he's smart, so he says, you should have the largest. You take the ox since you're the biggest. He said, I'm the middle, so I'll take the goat. And the fox is the smallest, he can have the hare. And so he thinks he said something very intelligent, right? He said, this makes sense. This is rational, this is fair, this is democracy, justice. The lion says, how can you speak of I and you in my presence? And he bites off his head. The lion kills the wolf. Oh, you think you're somebody, huh? And then Rumi says, the lion killed the wolf because anyone uttering I, ana, and we at the door of the divine court is turning back from the door and returning to non-entity. And then there is a section which is one of my favorites. So we'll read it, inshallah. We're getting to the fox. We'll see if he can outfox. See if he can outfox the lion. Because Rumi, and it's important to understand that Rumi doesn't simply tell these stories, but he uses these stories or discourses as frame tales, and then he'll tell stories within them. So, and then it'll seem like a tangent, and then he'll come back. So this is one of the kind of tangents within that story. So he is not going to say what the fox says until he tells you this. A certain man came and knocked at his friend's door. His friend asked him, "Who are you, O trusty one?" He answered, "It is I." So his friend said, "Go. It is not the time to come in. At a table like this, there is no place for the raw. Save for the fire of absence and separation, who will cook the raw one? Who will deliver him from hypocrisy?" So that wretched man traveled. He went away for a year in separation. From his friend, he was burned with sparks of fire. So you sent away for a year. That burned one from that separation became cooked. Then he returned and again paced to and fro beside the house of his friend. So now he knocked at the door with 100 fears and respects. And he adab and reverence. With 100 reverences and respect. He knocks on the door finally. Lest any disrespectful word might escape from his lips. The friend called from within, "Who's at the door?" He answered, "You are at the door, O charmer of hearts." "Now," said the friend, "since you are I, come in. O myself, there is no room in this house for two eyes." For that, O reader, the hand of God is necessary, for it is the kun fayakun. It is the bringer into existence of every impossible thing. By his hand, by the divine hand, every impossible thing is made possible. By reverence of him, every unruly one is made humble. So this is this beautiful image that Rumi is giving us, is that if we want to be entered into the presence of the friend, and beautifully Rumi of course calls Allah the beloved, but he also calls Allah the friend. Dost, the friend. And so if we want to be God's friends, which is, we talk about saints in Islam, but there's really no word literally that means saints. It means wali, means friend or intimate. The awliya are those who draw near to Allah. If we want to be friends with God, we have to let go of our own selfhood. We have to let go of this me, I. That's the only thing keeping us from coming in. And Rumi also said in another place beautifully, he said, "I knocked on the door of my beloved, but it wouldn't open. And so I wept all these tears, please let me in, please let me in. And I kept knocking, refusing to turn away. And one day it opened. And I realized I'd been knocking from within." So the great mystery of human subjectivity, human selfhood, and the divine reality, these things are mysteries. We can't speak about them. But the Sufis, that's why the Sufis, they counted aib like a shame to say I. Ana. Because that's the way of Iblis. He's the one who says Ana. Ana khayru minhu. I'm better than him. So you see Sufis, they won't refer to themselves in the first person. They'll say the faqir, the poor one, the one in need. Or maybe they say we, not like royal we, but like to kind of leave themselves out. Like we have a request or we did something. They're very wary of I. Because this I, it's the only thing that stands between us and the divine reality. It's the only thing that stands between us and the door being open. La ilaha illa hu. That's why we say hu. Hu indicates the divine essence. Right? And this whole teaching is that the divine reality, right, Qalb mu'min arsh rahman. The heart of the believer is the throne of the All-Merciful. But there's a usurper on the throne. And what is the usurper? Ana. There's this ego sitting on the throne. Me, I. Thinking it's God. Thinking it's a deity. Thinking others should worship it. May Allah forgive us and free us of the tyranny of this ego self. Right? And all of these stories and fairy tales and Disney movies, aren't they about, right? The usurper to the throne, right? Scar takes over the kingdom in The Lion King. It's just this story. Until Simba can come back and take his rightful place as the true king. It's a lion story. It's the same story. It's all the same story. It's all the same story. Every myth, every story, it's all that there's a usurper to the throne. Right? Aladdin is the same thing with Jafar, right? He hypnotizes the king and darkness reigns upon the kingdom. It's like that. So there is a hypnosis that our ego has put us in, and so we become veiled for the divine reality. The whole path of surrender, the whole path of submission, the whole path of Islam is to remove the ego self so that the divine light can be enthroned in our hearts and we can walk in light. Ameen. So then Rumi has this section, which we'll read part of it. It's called Sifat al-Tawheed, the description of Tawheed, which we could say unification, oneness. And so he's commenting on this story that is a tangent by this metaphysical commentary. He says, his friend said to him, "Come in, O you who are entirely myself, not different, like the rose and thorn in the garden. The thread has become single. Do not fall into error if you see that the letters Kaf and Nun are two. Kaf and Nun are pulling like a noose, that they may draw non-existence into great affairs." So those that know Arabic know Kaf and Nun. These are the letters that make up the word kun, which means be. So he's saying that even though if you look on the surface, Kaf and Nun are two letters, but they're indicating one reality, which is the divine command of creation. So he's saying, if you just see the form, it might appear like, oh, these are two different letters. But in reality, they're only one, right? It's just indicated. So then he says, hence the noose must be double in the world of forms, though those two letters are single in effect. Whether the feet be two or four, they traverse one road, like the double shears which make one cut. So Allah uses all these outward forms to communicate, but it's one reality that's being communicated. Just like you, when you speak or when you write, you're using all these different letters to communicate one meaning. Right? Then he says, yet these two opposites who seem to be at odds are of one mind and acting together in agreement. Every prophet and every saint has a way, but it leads to God. All ways are one way. It appears like all these prophets, right? They have different messages, but the message is always La ilaha illallah, like we said. So if you think about this, and this is really beautiful, Rumi's using this analogy of language. And this is really profound on many levels because the Bible says in the beginning was the Word. Right? And the Quran says, Allah said, Kun fayakun. This is kind of what he's referencing. This is what he's referencing. Be and it is. So these traditions and other traditions speak about existence as a type of divine speech. Divine speech, divine breath, nafas ar-Rahman, the breath of the All-Merciful. And so Rumi is asking us to see the symbolism in this. And if you think about this, anyone who's learned a language, especially as an adult, raise your hand if you've learned a language. At least kind of learned one. Struggled to learn one. what happens, there are basically like 3 levels to speaking a language. The first is illiterate. You don't speak the language. Right? The second is that you kind of like struggle with it and you're starting to get it and you're understanding some things. And then the third level is, okay, now you're fluent. Right? It's like that. So if you're illiterate in a language, you look at the script of that language and it means nothing to you. So for instance, I don't speak Sanskrit. I would love to, but I don't. I look at Sanskrit text and it's very beautiful to me, but I can't make any meaning of it. Right? So I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, that looks nice. But to me, it's just symbols, but I can't see what they symbolize. It's interesting. We think about language because when you read, right, it's just like, but it's actually you're deciphering symbols. Right? Like someone said, he said, reading a book is amazing because we're looking at dead trees with ink dipped on it, and then we hallucinate all these worlds of meaning. Right? If you try to, you're just looking at this dead tree, and you're having this experience. It's meaning. Likewise, the world is language. The world is a book. Those who are not fluent in it, those who are illiterate, those who are veiled, they just see this happening, that happening. They can't make meaning. They can't read it. The whole Quran, what does it say? Read the signs. Look at the signs. Reflect on the signs. Everything is signs. Ayat. Even the Quran, its own verses, it calls signs. And the same thing it calls its verses, it calls everything in the cosmos. We will show you our ayat, our signs on the horizons and within yourself. So everything is speech, is language, is scripture, is revelation. The whole cosmos is a great book, but also within ourselves. Anfusihim, it's the plural of nafs. Within yourselves, your nafses are these ayat. So the verses are in the scriptures. The verses are all around you and the verses are all within you. But you have to be able to read. So the revelations come so that we can learn how to read. The signs of existence, but also the signs of our own subjectivity and selfhood. Right? So when you're learning a language, you have to sound it out. Right? Like you look, if you're just learning, right, Arabic, you might see like here, Ain, Shin, Qaf, Ishq, Ishq. Oh, that means love. It's like if you're just learning English, you're like L-O-V-E, love. Right? You're sounding it out. So this is like someone who's starting on the path. They're kind of struggling to make meaning and understanding, and they're kind of like, what does this mean? Okay, I'm getting this, I'm not getting this, right? You're kind of, this is that nafs al-lawama. You're in the middle stage of the self. Some things you understand, some things you don't, right? Likewise, this is kind of that self. But once you attain fluency, it's totally different. When you read a book, you're not actually like looking at, right, when it says a certain man came and knocked, I'm not like a certain man came and knocked, but it's that I've actually become fluent in this language. And so I look at it as a whole. I don't even see each letter. I just see these symbols that I recognize, these words that I recognize almost like intuitively, like second nature. And so immediately I'm just swimming in the meaning that is being conveyed. This is how the awliya are in existence. They look at existence and they're just swimming in meaning. They're no longer even seeing the letters. They're seeing through the letters into what they're conveying. Each thing is a letter. Each thing is a word. Each one of us. The awliya, they're just seeing meaning. Of course, they see the letters. Like when I read, I see it. But there's a degree to which I don't even see it. Because I see what its meaning is. And I'm experiencing that. That's what Rumi's saying. So he's saying when you see kun, kaf, and nun, it's like seeing K and N. You don't just see those as separate things. You see this as one meaning being articulated. So this is this profound teaching that Rumi is using just the alphabet to teach us like this. Then he says, again, the existence of the world of sense and color is narrower, the outer forms, for it is a narrow prison. The cause of narrowness is composition or compoundness and number, meaning plurality or multiplicity. The senses are moving towards composition. In other words, our senses, we see outer forms and we see multiplicity. Know that the world of Tawheed, of unification, lies beyond sense. If you want unity, march in that direction. The divine command kun was a single act, and the two letters kaf and nun occurred only in speech, while the inward meaning was pure and uncompounded. This discourse has no end. Return, that we may see what happened to the wolf and the lion. So that's how he does it. He'll like go over on these profound like metaphysical tangent, and then he'll come back to the story. Subhanallah, Maulana. So just so you see, then he says, the lion tore off the head of the wolf in order that two-headedness might not remain. And duality. Duality. So after unceremoniously killing the wolf, he turns to the fox. He says, what do you say we do with it? So now the fox is like, La ilaha illallah. You do not want to answer incorrectly. Like, this is serious all of a sudden. So he says, the fox bowed low and said, this fat ox will be your breakfast, and this goat will be your lunch, and this hare will be your dinner. So basically he's saying, it's all for you. Like, you eat it all. I'm good. So what does the king then say? The lion says, O fox, from who did you learn to divide in such a manner? And where did you learn this? He said, O king of the world, I learned it from the fate of the wolf. Yeah? In other words, the people of wisdom, they don't need to necessarily go through all the difficult things themselves. They take wisdom from what they witness in others. The lion said, inasmuch as you have become pledged to love of me, you may take all three animals. O fox, since you have become entirely mine, how should I harm you when you have become me? I am yours, and all the beasts of chase are yours. Set your foot on the seventh heaven and mount beyond. Since you have taken a warning from the fate of the wolf, you are not a fox. You yourself are the lion. A wise man is he that in the hour of shunned tribulations takes warning from the death of his friends. Right? In a certain sense, this is what narrative is all about. This is why stories and narrative and myth and teaching and parable and wisdom are at the heart of all civilization and wisdom tradition, and even, right, all these Marvel movies. And why do we all want to go to the movie theater and narrative? And it's because when you hear a story, a wisdom teaching, you're able to live out the consequences of all the characters without actually having to go through it yourself. This is what contemplation and reflection is really about. It's that you can reflect so that you let all your bad ideas live their implications of themselves out so they can die and you don't have to. Right? You don't have to go through it yourself if you take wisdom from it. This is why these teaching wisdom stories, this is really a secret to why Maulana even frames all this wisdom in narrative. Even Dostoevsky, the great novelist, Russian novelist, in The Brothers Karamazov, right, one of his great novels, he sets up three brothers, and one of them represents atheism, these new ideas that were coming from Europe to Russia at the time. One of them represents just hedonism, like indifference to the spiritual life. And the younger brother, Alyosha, represents a believer. And he has the center of that novel is a debate between the young brother, who's like on the spiritual path and goes to be a monk, and the older brother who had studied in Europe and become like an arrogant atheist, right? So there's debating. And what Dostoevsky said, he said, in the debates, he said, because Dostoevsky was also a really profound thinker, psychologist, philosopher. Even Nietzsche said, I learned more about psychology from Dostoevsky than anyone else. These like psychological novels, understanding the self. I don't know if Nietzsche read Rumi, because he would have got way more. But what Dostoevsky, because Dostoevsky was a believer himself, and he went through his period of like atheism. And he said, just through the dialogue, I couldn't actually bring out the victory of the believing brother over the other one. Because the atheist one had a lot of good points. Because he didn't want to strawman it. He wanted to really make it as strong as possible. But then he said, but the only way I was able to show how atheism is wrong is to live out the implications of living like that through the narrative. And then you see the darkness that it leads to. So like that, narratives can unveil profound things. May Allah allow us to learn from the mistakes of others so we don't have to go through them ourselves. So, this is essentially the narrative, and just to read a couple more lines. The fox said to himself, 100 thanks to the lion for having called me up after the wolf. If he'd called me first, I would have done the same thing as the wolf. So he was like, okay, I learned. No. So, to close, what do we think the symbolism of this story is? Who is the lion? It's a part of us. The ruh, the higher spirit. This is the lion. And who's the wolf? The wolf at this point is the nafs. But it's the nafs that has been refined. It's not that lower commanding self. It's the self that has become inspired and actually is on the lip of enlightenment. Right? But, so because it still honors the wolf. It's this selfhood, right? This soul, or this nafs, that honors the wolf, but it still wants something for itself. So it said, I'll do my prayers, I'll do my good, I'll give my charity, but I still want to be the man, you know? It still has some ego traces. So it says, yes, you take the biggest, but also leave some for me, right? Right? So what is he saying? If you're really about this path, you have to give it all to the Spirit. You can't hold anything back. You can't say, but I want my little portion. No. You have to give it all. And so the fox represents, anyone? No?
The student.
No. I'll give you a hint. It's related to what the fox was supposed to eat. Yes. The intellect. So, yes. So the hare represents what? The partial intellect. But in the first lion story, it was the partial intellect, but even a partial intellect that's separate can start to receive inspiration from God at moments. Right? So that hare did give inspiration, which allowed it to have the lion of arrogance be thrown in the well. But it was still a partial intellect. The fox represents the aqli kulli, the awakened intellect. So even its food is the hare, right? So it has kind of consumed the lower intellect and become this higher intellect. The higher intellect is the intellect which sees with the light of spirit. It's basically been wed to the spirit. So this is the consciousness of one who is actually the light of spirit is shining in that individual's consciousness, and now they're seeing everything through the light of Tawheed. They're not seeing their separate thing and that separate thing. They're seeing that all of it is communication from the divine. Everything is letters communicating divine wisdom. So Rumi's really getting at here that every level of the nafs has its challenge. And at this level, right, the lip of full enlightenment or full mutma'inna, the veil or the challenge is the very sense of I, the very sense of self-consciousness or self-awareness or separate identity, right? So the first lion, the parallel problem was egoism. Okay? But this one, it's not exactly egoism because you've kind of transformed that arrogance. Now, you're not arrogant. It wasn't arrogance, but there's still a separate sense of I, which is keeping you from true divine unity. And Rumi's getting at that there's a deep-seated egoism that has usurped the deepest part of our humanity. And it's lying behind the subconscious drives and emotions and desires. And so how do we overcome it, right? All traditions have kind of monastic ideals, even a tradition like Islam, which doesn't have monks or nuns, but the idea of poverty, chastity, obedience, eating less, sleeping less, speaking less. It's through that we kind of overcome these things, and also community and being in a community of spiritual seekers and a prophetic example. And then, of course, the Sufis add the peer, the spiritual guide, having someone who has arrived to support. So, one of the important things to point out is that there is an autobiographical part to this in many stories of the Mathnawi. So Rumi was a great spiritual teacher, and he was already spiritually very, very advanced when he met Shams, but he had not attained that final fatah, that great opening, that great enlightenment. So he was like on the lip of that, but he still had some separateness. He still had some I. And so what does Shams do when he meets him? After he takes him into his guidance, he says, you're no longer a teacher. You're no longer a sheikh. You no longer have disciples. You no longer have your position and your reputation. He basically has Rumi, he's like, retire. And so Rumi says, then I retire. He left all of that just to be in this contemplation with Shams. And this is because he had to leave that. Something of that was like the final veil that was blocking him from true attainment of extinction in divine unity and divine love. And so he exchanged those things and that reputation and that teaching with ecstasy of mystical experience and love and transcendence. And of course, Rumi is emphatic that love is the thing that's going to wean us from all of our things, because love, at the end of the day, the nafs wants to feel good, it wants to feel big, it wants to feel important. We all want this, right? But love is the one thing that makes you feel smaller, but in a good way, right? No one likes to be belittled or made to feel small or unimportant or negative. But when you feel love, you feel small, but in a good way. So Rumi's getting at that love, it actually shrinks your ego. If it's true love, if it's divine love, if it's altruistic love, it's an easier way to shrink your ego than too much hardship and difficulty, right? No. And Rumi reached this point where he could barely distinguish between himself and Shams and between God and Shams, right? He was like in the state of so deep in divine love and divine light that he was like, it was all oneness. And they talk about this, that we hear about this term fana fillah, annihilation or extinguishment in God. This is when the drop comes to the ocean, as Rumi said, and there's no more drop. Right? This is when the moth, to use another one of his images, flies to the flame and is burnt up. There's only divine unity. But before that, there's fana fi Rasulullah. There's extinguishment in the Prophet of God, sallallahu alaihi. when you truly, this is following his sunnah. Don't just think it's about beard length and clothes. You extinguish yourself in the light of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi until you just see nothing but him sallallahu alaihi. And before that, the way to get there, to these higher levels, is fana fi shaykh. If you have a true master, they will be a mirror for you, and they will help you to extinguish your illusory traits. They say about the shaykh that the shaykh is a mirror and reflects to you your faults. And it's a very strange thing that I wouldn't have necessarily believed if I didn't experience it, but there's something about like being in the presence of a individual who is a clear mirror, where you see yourself, you're like, oh, like I thought I was doing great. I mean, in their presence, you're like, oh, I am not who I thought I was. I have major work to do. It's true. And it's you don't love it, but you also know that this is the only way that you're going to become clear of that. Right? And that's why Ibn Ata'Allah, in one of his hikam, he said, don't be on the lookout for spiritual experiences. And he said, just be on the lookout for the faults in your ego. Because if you want, what's that opening is the reflection, the light reflected in the mirror of being. That's what I want to see. He said, if you want to experience that, all you have to do is polish the mirror. That's the defect. Just polish the mirror. Don't be like, where's the light? Where's the light? Just be like, where's the rust on the mirror? That's what we focus on. And then the light will come. You don't have to seek the light. You just have to seek all that's in you that blocks the light. Ya Latif. So, the nafs's claim to identity, right? The nafs says, ana, provokes the lion and costs the wolf his head. The aql, the higher intellect of wisdom, makes no such claim. The partial intellect is the intellect cut off from the light of spirit, and so it becomes a tool of the nafs, whereas the universal intellect is the intellect as a tool of the spirit. So the central message of this discourse is that there are no room for two eyes. And this is why, just to close, the other, right, our sisters mentioning the study of Vedanta and non-dual schools, right, they say things like, you are the ultimate reality, right? Atman is Brahman, and these kind of like things. The Sufis would be like, be careful saying these type of things. Because if it's your nafs saying it, it's a big problem. If you're not actually there, it's coming from the wrong place, right? So Rumi says that he uses this idea of the ruby. He says we have a stony nature and a ruby nature. A stony is blocking the light. A ruby is reflecting the light. So he says a ruby, if it loves itself, it is loving the sun. If it loves the sun, it is loving itself. It's all the light. He said, but the stone, if it loves itself, it is intensely unfaithful. It blocks the light. You hold a stone up, blocks the light. So this is the idea. And then he says, Pharaoh claimed divinity and was destroyed. Pharaoh, Ana Rabbukum al-A'la, I am your Lord Most High. Where he said, Hallaj said the same thing and was saved. We'll get to this later, but Hallaj is the great mystic who has this mystical utterances, Ana al-Haq, I am the real. But the Sufis, and he was martyred for this blasphemy, but the Sufis later said, no, he was speaking from absence from self. It was purely the cleansed mirror that was reflecting the light of divine unity. So he spoke from truth, even though people that were stuck on the outward couldn't accept that. That's a longer story, we will get into that. But the point here is that the Sufis emphasize not saying, I am the truth, until you become there, but to say, Huwa al-Haq. Who is the pronoun which indicates the divine essence. We say who, it means the divine essence, right? So for instance, one of the students was with his sheikh, and the sheikh said to him, he said, who's better? Who's spiritually better? The one who says, I'm so wonderful, I'm so amazing, I'm so spiritual, or the one who says, I'm so terrible, I'm so weak, I'm such a sinner. And so the student thinks, he said, definitely the second one is better because he's being humble. And the Shaykh says, no, they're both the same. They just keep saying, I. Just say Allah. Just say Allah. Get over yourself. They're both obsessed with themselves. Right? So the Sufis, they just say, who. And eventually yourself will be gone. Right? Don't just... And so, in closing, we started with the dhikr. La ilaha illallah, Allah, Allah, hu. These are central to the Sufi path. Our Master Habib Umar, in commenting upon this, he said that we have descending levels of the self. Our self, we have the heart, which is the seat of consciousness. And the heart is unlocked, the spiritual heart, by La ilaha illallah. Repeating it unlocks the heart. Inside the heart, in a deeper dimension of ourself, there is the ruh, the spirit. And the spirit is unlocked by saying, Allah, Allah. Inside the spirit, the inner reality of the spirit, the batin of the spirit, is called the sir, which is often translated as secret. But a better translation is mystery. Because a secret is something you don't tell, but a mystery is something you can't tell, even if you wanted to. And what unlocks the mystery at the center of our being? Hu. And even beyond this, the secret, they say there's a secret of secrets, sir. But that's for someone else to talk about. So may Allah open our hearts and open our spirits and open our inner mysteries to His presence. And may we come to Him without arrogance and without egos and truly be humble. And may we be humbled gently, not the difficult way. Because everyone will come to Him humble. So we ask for the gentle path to that humility, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Rumi says everyone will come to this path, some willingly and some unwillingly. It's best to come now while you still have a choice than to be dragged at death when you have no option. La ilaha illallah. May Allah bring us gently and not bring us severely. Ya Rabbil Alameen. And may Allah allow us to be those who have adab with Him and adab with each other and adab with Him through each other. And may we take the benefit of this place, this blessed city, and may we come to Him not saying ana, but come saying who. Who is it that is at the door? Who. Alhamdulillah. إلى حضرة الفاتحة.